My name is Paige Horn, and today we are going to be presenting about purchase order processing with Dynamics GP and how that can be extended by using Cavallo's products. I'm the customer support manager here at Njevity, and we are the creators of Power GP Online. A little bit of backstory about me: I was an accountant by education. I was a controller for a restaurant holdings company that had restaurants all over the United States. And from there, I kind of got picked up by my partner and my bar and went to go work and be a consultant for them. So I was in industry and I was a consultant, and now I run our support and provisioning departments here at Njevity. So I've kind of been a jack of all trades. I've been on each side of it, and I think that brings a little bit of a unique perspective to GP and to accounting and ERP. And so that's a little bit about me. I'll let Matt introduce himself, and then we'll get started on the content.
Thank you, Paige. I'm Matt Grierville. I'm the Senior Director of Go-to-Market Engineering and Sales at Cavallo. I've been with Cavallo for about 9 years. But prior to that, I was with a small aftermarket manufacturer in the motorcycle space. It was a small family-run business, so I wore a lot of different hats. And then between that and Cavallo, I also did a small 4-year stint over at Oracle as a principal sales consultant doing solution engineering. So that's a little of my background. I've been in wholesale distribution and light manufacturing in some form for the past couple decades, but really happy to be on the call today and looking forward to diving into this topic.
I'll get started then. And so I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about Njevity. At Njevity, our mission is to improve the life and success of our customers and partners by providing exceptional business application experiences that simplify, inform, and delight. And that's what we hope to bring to you today, is just some tips to simplify things and give you some information that will hopefully delight you and your coworkers. Who is Njevity? We are a value-added reseller, which is also known as a partner. We provide support just for GP. GP is all that we do. We have people at our company that have worked with GP since it was on floppy disks, and people who really, truly love and live and breathe GP. And so we think that brings a unique perspective there. We are the creators of Power GP Online, so we are an ISV. We have tools inside of our Power GP Online product like Power GP Banking, Power GP Import. We have an API tool as well. So we have some unique features if you are inside of Power GP Online. And then we're also the founding members of the Knights of GP. You might ask, what is the Knights of GP? It is a co-op for GP customers and committed ISVs, and members will have agency over what kind of new features they might want or what kind of timelines they might want. Payroll tax updates and training and other resources. And if you are interested in becoming a part of the Knights of GP or just want some more information about that, there's a QR code on the screen that you can take a picture of and look at, and that will get you some more information about the Knights of GP. You might ask, why do we need the Knights of GP? Well, that's because Microsoft has, I'm sure you guys have all heard or seen, has released that they will stop providing security updates or support at the end of 2029 and security enhancements at the end of 2031. We at Njevity believe that you should be able to make those decisions on your timeline, that they should not be forced upon you, that you should be able to make an ERP change when you want to. So the Knights of GP hopes to, if you want to stay on GP, until you retire or, for the foreseeable future, we are going to be there to be able to help you and give you resources and new features and provide and kind of step in where Microsoft is leaving off. So again, if that's something you're interested in, feel free to either reach out or look at that QR code. I'm going to go ahead and let Matt introduce Cavallo and talk through that as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Paige. So I always like to start off with our why, and our why is really quite simple. We're laser focused on making our customers more profitable, competitive, and valuable. And we do that with the purpose-built solutions that we've been creating since 2003. And since then, we've served a number of clients. We can jump ahead to the next slide, Page. Just a little background on the history here and kind of the number of distributors we've served. So again, founded in 2003 with our initial SalesPad for GP product, which was order entry and sales monitor workflow. And since then, we've evolved. We have, warehouse management tools. We'll see the purchasing tools today, but we've served over 1,000 distributors and helped them to recapture over $100 million in value, whether it be through reduction in touch points on order processing or gross margin visibility and savings related to that. But we do have a high retention rate with our clients. So we have a 92% retention rate, NPS score of 95. And over those 1,000 distributors that we've served, we've seen in excess of about 21,000 users that have been on our platform and recognize the value of what we bring to the table. We can go to the next one. I think that might be. Oh yeah. Just one more quick note, just to echo what Paige mentioned and Njevity's commitment to the GP space. So we share in that sentiment. So we're committed to not only develop but support the products that you're going to see today, which layer directly on top of Dynamics GP for at least the next decade. So we feel the same way that you should be able to make that big decision of an ERP change on your timeline, and so we're going to be here to support that in the long run.
Great, thanks, Matt. So we're going to talk, the agenda, what we're going to talk about today is some practical tips and time-saving tricks for purchase order processing just inside GP. And then Matt is going to kind of expand that and talk about how SalesPad extends GP with more advanced capabilities and insights to manage vendors and execute purchase orders and make confident replenishment decisions to avoid stockouts and overstocks. So I'll go ahead and get started on my end with Dynamics GP pop tips here. And all right, so the first one is copying an existing PO to create a new one. And what is the problem that we're trying to solve here is that building a PO from scratch costs your team time on recurring vendor orders. And this may be something you already know, but you can, when you're inside of a purchase order, drop down the actions button and click create and copy a new PO. If you have a vendor order that's the same or similar line items, this is very helpful to do. Also, if you require a purchase order for stuff that you are ordering every single month, same thing. So job cost and project accounting data does not come across with those, so that is something you want to be careful about if you're using those modules. All the line items will copy over into the purchase order, and then you can edit and make changes as you need. The next one is auto-generate POs from inventory reorder points. Manually reviewing every item to decide what needs reordering takes time. So you can use transactions purchasing purchase order generator, and that's kind of what this screenshot is right here. You are able to kind of put some restrictions in there and decide what it is that you want to reorder. The next tip here is that vendor prepayment on a purchase order. So this is a nice feature. You are able, as you do a purchase order, if you have a prepayment that you need to write, whether that's a check or say a common one that I have seen with our customers is that you're on the phone doing a purchase order, and then you have to pay over the phone with a credit card or with an EFT or something like that for let's say in this example $500. So you can do that. You're able to do a computer check and actually print that check out and mail it off to them, or you can do a manual payment with, like I mentioned, a credit card. You can do it for any amount there, and it actually records that payment, and it will apply it when you match the invoice later. So it's going to be out there as a vendor payment. So this is something that I have heard from lots of customers of ours that they did not know was possible, and so that is a good trick to know. You don't have to do a kind of messier thing. I've seen people try to do a workaround where they do a bank transaction for their online payment or their credit card payment over the phone, and then it's not attached to the vendor or attached to the PO, and that solves that issue. The next one is receiving against multiple POs in a single receipt. The problem is that whenever the vendor ships from several open POs in one delivery, if you've had 20 POs open with a vendor, they may ship everything together. And so you can use one receiving transaction entry to receive against multiple POs. And that is pretty easy to do there. Just, go in and pick the different POs on the same receipt. Landed cost is one thing that I did want to talk about. What is landed cost? So landed costs are additional costs that you have to incur to get your inventory into your possession, right? So it's not, necessarily baked into the line item. It might be like a fuel surcharge, or it might be a shipping surcharge, or an insurance surcharge if you're shipping something if you're ordering something that's being shipped that is a high dollar value item. And so, again, like customs, all of that stuff, that is what landed costs are. So you can set up landed cost inside of GP. It's inventory and cards and landed costs. So it is in the inventory module, but it does really interact with purchase orders. So that's why I thought it was something a little bit unique to talk about with purchase orders. You can see in the screenshot on the screen that you pick the vendor that you're going to be paying for those specific items. So if you've got an insurance company that you have to pay to get all that, really high dollar inventory into your warehouse, then you could put in that insurance company. Here we're looking at freight. So it's a timely shipping service that we're paying. And down here, you can have a cost calculation method. So you can have a percent, or you can have a flat per shipment, or you can have a flat per item. So it kind of depends on how you're going to calculate those things. And then you have the amount down here. You can also have landed cost groups as well for putting those in as well. You are going to have an accrued purchases account as well that we'll set up. And then on the next screen, I'm going to look at how you're going to add that to the receipt. So transactions, purchasing, receiving, transaction entry, you can do it on the whole receipt in this window that I have here. That's the example that I have here. So it came down to my landed cost on the receiving transaction entry. And once I did that, it popped up this cost appropriation window. And here you've got your landed cost ID. So same one that we just used before. So for my example here that I am receiving this PO 1002, we had to pay $200, which is a flat amount per every shipment when I use this landed cost ID. You can see here that it's going to be going to this accrued purchases account and then this expense account or cost of goods account over here, whatever you put that in over there. You can also do something very similar here where you are going into the line item and doing the same landed cost. So if it's just a specific line item, like we were just talking about on the last slide, you might have some POs that have a landed cost or some items that have a landed cost, but not the entire shipment, right? So the shipment might be multiple POs or might have items that are not needing to have this specific landed cost assigned. So you can do it at the item level or at the entire receiving transaction document level. The next one, as somebody who is an accountant by education and kind of by trade in a past life, that first one that I have here on reports is pretty important. So monitor the received, not invoiced report. So what does that mean? That is under reports and purchasing and analysis, and the received, not invoiced report. And what that does is it is going to identify for you receipts that have been received but have not been invoiced. So obviously at the end of the month, you're going to have some type of variance where you've received the information or that you've received the inventory, but you haven't received the information for the invoice yet, right? So the received not invoiced report should tie out to your accrued purchases account. It's almost as important, if not as important, as reconciling your AP to reconcile your received not invoiced report for purchase orders. That allows you to tie out those two items, but it also makes sure that your accrual balance isn't just growing and growing and growing, and that you can reach out to that vendor and say, hey, where's our invoice? I have seen lots of times where customers ignore the receipt that invoice in that accrual account, and then it comes to the audit time, or it's the end of the year, they're like, oh shoot, I've got this huge balance and I never received an invoice for this, and how did we receive this? So that's something to keep on top with. I would say monthly if possible. You can do returns versus returns with credit. So if there's two types of returns with purchase orders. If you're using transactions purchasing, returns transaction entry, you can choose return to adjust inventory only. So if you are sending something back in inventory, but you're not going to receive a credit, you might do that. If you are actually going to get a credit for AP, then you're going to pick the return with credit type, which is going to actually put in a credit memo that you can apply to your AP balance whenever you're paying your invoices. So there's two separate items there, and sometimes people aren't sure what the differences are. Return with credit actually gives you a credit memo to apply inside of the AP. Close and remove old POs regularly. Just like I think we talked, if you were in our SOP webinar last month, you want to go to edit purchase order to manually close POs. If you have all these POs that are open, you definitely want to make sure that you close those, and then you can run the remove completed purchase orders utility under tools, utilities, and purchasing, and remove completed POs to archive closed purchase orders. So that last one is something I hear a lot about. People say, I've got all these POs that are still out there. What can I do? Especially if you're a high volume shop, you definitely want to go out and close those POs. And that again is under tools, utilities, purchasing, and remove completed purchase orders. That is what I have for our tips and tricks for GP. So I'm going to pass it over to Matt, and he's going to do his SalesPad purchasing enhancements. He has a little slide here to talk about what he's going to talk about, and then I think it's going to be mostly live demo. So I will pass it over to you, Matt.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Paige. So we'll spend most of the time inside of SalesPad and see some of the sort of enhanced flows that you can use to manage your purchasing process or your procure-to-pay process. And so just to kind of step through the flow and what to expect that we'll go through. So we'll start with a little bit of vendor management. So how do we raise the visibility of different metrics related to the vendor? So what are you buying from them? Do you have special cost arrangements with them? What are open POs? What are your last interactions with that vendor? So bringing all of those details to the surface so that as a buyer, you're equipped with all that information that you need to go in and make that purchasing decision. So we'll start with a little bit of vendor management, and then we'll talk more about purchase order execution. So how do we aggregate demand signals and then act on those in a very simple, clean, intuitive way? So we'll be looking at our purchase advisor to help us facilitate that. And then now that we've got that purchase order out there, how do we pull those items in as they reach our dock in an efficient way? And so we'll talk a little bit about the receivings transaction entry. That, by the way, ties into exactly what Paige just mentioned. So we effectively leave the posting to GP, and so any receipt transaction entry that we initiate through SalesPad will be in a posting batch inside of GP that you can go ahead and post, and then those quantities would be available and visible in your on-hand stock total. But we'll go ahead and jump into it. Let me share my screen here. And let's see here. And Paige, can you confirm you're seeing SalesPad?
Yep, I'm seeing it.
Perfect. So as I mentioned, we'll start with a little bit of vendor management. And for those of you that were at the SOP webinar, a lot of this is going to be similar. It's just kind of mirrored on the AP side of the house, so the purchasing side. And so just like customers are presented on a search grid, vendors are presented on a search grid as well. And so finding a vendor is very simple. You can use your auto filter row here. And so if there's a name or an address code or a contact person, or maybe you want to look them up by a phone number, you can quickly, enter a value and filter this list down to the vendor that you're looking for. And then again, just like the customer side, we can right click on these headers and I can bring up my column chooser. And so if there's a particular class ID or something that I want to filter by, or maybe there's a user defined field. So SalesPad supports unlimited user defined fields. And so if there's a attribute that you use to sort of classify your vendors and you want that visible so you can sort by that, you can go ahead and bring that up here and simply drop and drag that value into the grid and then use that as search criteria. So just kind of starting there, very, very simple to filter. The other thing that we can do with these filters is you can save a filter view. And so as a buyer, maybe you want to focus on this subset of vendors. And so you want to start with that list of vendors and then go to another subset. You can save a filter and maybe have one for each group of vendors that you look at from a buying perspective to kind of keep it organized. So that might be another way to use the search grid to your advantage. But let me open up a vendor record. And so again, we have a tab layout. So whenever I'm on a search grid or a list lookup and I open up that master record, it's going to display on this secondary tab. So I can multitask. I can have multiple vendors open at the same time and toggle quickly back and forth between them and then back to the vendor search. But just to kind of talk about the layout of the master record here and sort of the insights we try to bring to the surface from a vendor management perspective. So the left-hand corner is typically reserved for vendor properties, although you can configure this. You can change layouts. You can move fields around just like you could on the column chooser. You can add additional details here, but typically we're seeing sort of high level, the status, the terms, the currency, that sort of thing. If you hover over the vendor number, you can see what was billed, what was paid over the last 4 years. So we always present that history. And then we have an open purchase order view. And so any of your purchase orders that are open, we can see those here, and we can also right click and bring in our column chooser, or we can expose our auto filter row. So if I wanted to go down to a particular PO number or a date, I could quickly filter to that purchase order. And then these are all hyperlinks that I can drill into a specific document, and that will just open up on a new tab for me. Down below, so open POs, primary information, vendor properties, but we always have this sort of row of sub listings that are related to that master record. And so we have our contacts here, but we could also go into something like item history. And so I can see, right now I'm showing 6 months, but I can increase that, decrease that accordingly. And so I can see all the specific items and the quantity we ordered and the PO we ordered it from. So I've got this great search grid. And again, I could go in, show auto filter row. I can bring in additional columns. So however I want to sort that data, I can easily filter through that. That's an item-centric view. If you take a more purchase order-centric view, we got you covered as well. So I can look at POs and look at my auto filter row, filter down to POs, and this will include anything that I've received and sort of closed out. That'll be visible there. One other thing I wanted to mention is we also have this vendor special costing. And so the vendor special costing will allow you to establish thresholds that effectively allow you to recognize any sort of cost savings that you've negotiated with your vendor. So just as an example, I have this item here that's listed twice, and you can see that it's tied to a starting and an end quantity. So if I buy 100 or 1 to 500 from this vendor, my cost is 11 cents per item. But now if I go 500 to a million, that goes down to 9 cents. So similar to the way the price levels work when you're structuring item sales with your customers, we've also got that on the costing side for vendors so that you can recognize that savings that you may have negotiated with one of your vendors. And so wanted to point that out as another tool that can be utilized to really manage your vendors there. All right, let's go ahead and change gears here. So from a vendor management perspective, simple lookups, a lot of insights that we surface on that master record. So you're doing it all from one location. But let's change gears, like I said, and talk about demand aggregation and how do we look at those demand signals in an effective way and cut those POs and act on it. So the tool that we use to do that is the Purchase Advisor. And so the Purchase Advisor is essentially, like I said, it's aggregating all those demand signals. And when I say signals plural, I'm talking demand that might be coming in from sales documents that you actually have. It could be reorder driven too. So if you have a reorder point that you want to backfill to, it can factor that in as well. And so the way this report works, there's really three things I want to point out. We'll break it down into kind of three different parts. So the first part is, where do we want to collect those demand signals from? And to a certain extent, I guess this menu up here kind of feeds into that. And so one of those questions might be, do we want to look at sales demand exclusively? Do we want to look at reorder demand or reorder point demand exclusively, or do we want to consolidate and think about both of those in the quantities that we need to order? So that's one aspect is what are we including in the demand? The next thing is, where is that demand pulling from? So is it a single location? Is it multiple locations? Do we want to focus on a specific item number or an item class? Are there specific orders that we want to look at? And when we're setting this up, we can also pick doc IDs. And so we can make this tied to a particular doc ID. So when we're thinking about where does the sales demand come from, maybe we want to ignore one doc ID that's associated to another segment of our business, but these are the doc IDs we want to factor in that demand. So you can you can select the doc ID, and so that's that top section. You know, the first of three sections we'll go through here. That's where does the demand come from? What's included? You know, how are we pulling that data in? So now that we have that determined, there's a summary and a detail section. And so the summary is going to aggregate that demand for one row per item. And so, for example, this 10001, this tapered set screw, it's simply telling me I need 100. I can also see things like what's my on hand and what's my allocated. So my available, in this case, happens to be 0, and I have nothing on PO. So I've got visibility of all of those related data points for that particular item. Now, if I wanted to dig a little bit further into this 100 and say, okay, where's that demand coming from? If I highlight the row, we can look at the demand detail section. And so this demand detail section is tied to whatever row is currently highlighted. And so in this case, it's telling me to get 100 units, and that is because I have 3 sales documents. And if I look at the sales documents and the quantity needed, you know, effectively what was back ordered on each of those sales orders, I can see for this first one I have 50 that I was short, then I was short 25. So my back order total is 100. And so I'm essentially saying I need to get 100 to satisfy those current demand, the demand coming from those sales orders. Now, if I also had a reorder point set up for that item and I wanted to purchase against that, it would pad that number and throw in the reorder point value as well. And so as you scroll through this, you can go ahead and highlight these different rows. And as you can see, as you go through that, it'll update the demand detail with what's rolling into that particular number that it's recommending. So once you have the sort of the demand identified, the next part is creating the vendor plan, which then allows you to execute the purchase orders. And so if I wanted to create the vendor plans, I can go ahead and do that. And it'll go through this list and identify the primary vendor that I have set up in GP, and it'll make a proposed purchase plan for me that I can go ahead and decide, do I want to purchase or not through this secondary screen. So if I wanted to go into purchase, and I'm going to pull this window over, it just opened on another screen. It's going to group my vendors together and all the items that I need to purchase for that vendor. Now, on this particular grid, I only have a vendor plan set up for this particular vendor, the Advanced Office Systems. But if you had multiple vendors on there, you would see them sort of in a cascading, you know, view on the left. And as you toggled through, your purchase plan items would change depending on the vendor that you're focused on. But for today, I just have that one vendor that I can buy from. And so you can see that it pulled in the different lines, you know, for my items. So if you recall, this 1001, I needed 25 for one order, 25 for another, 50 for another. Then I had some other fasteners that I needed. So it pulled those all in. And I can go ahead and multi-select these and create the PO. And there's different settings in here, like maybe I want to group like item numbers. And so rather than having 3 separate purchase orders for effectively the same item, or rather 3 different lines for the same item on the same purchase order, I could group those and just have one line of 100, so it's not repeating that line for the different quantities. In some cases, maybe it makes sense to have separate lines. You know, maybe there's different dates you want to pull them in, or you know, there might be an advantage to that. But if you do want to consolidate, there's an option to do that. And so we can go ahead and multi-select and then just generate the PO directly from this screen, and it will do all that on the background and generate what we need. So now if we get out of Purchase Advisor, so now we've got the purchase order that's sitting out there. We've communicated that requirement to the vendor. And now it comes time to receive that purchase order, and goods are arriving on our dock. So SalesPad also has a receiving transactions entry view. And so this works very similar to what we saw with all of our search grids. And so what this will allow me to do is list all of my PO lines in the search grid here. And I can filter this down by a particular vendor. So maybe I want to just look and focus on a particular vendor, or maybe I know the PO number. I could also use a tethered barcode scanner. So if a packing slip is now, I'm taking it off the packaging and I've got a packing slip, I could go ahead and scan that and it'll filter this list down to that particular PO number. But one of the things that this search grid does a really good job of is allowing you to enter and key in receipt values, the quantities that arrived at your dock very quickly without having to toggle through multiple screens. And so just as an example here, I have PO 2086. So let's just filter this, clean it up a little bit. PO 2086. So now I'm just looking at this particular PO. So let's say this arrived at my dock and all 4 items are there. I can quickly tab through and just say, yep, I got 10 of those. Yep, 5 of those came in, 5 of those, and yes, I did in fact get the 10 of that last item. So I can quickly toggle through, enter the quantities that I want to receive, and go ahead and save that. And when I save that, it's going to take those quantities to receive and generate my receipt, which is now in a receivings batch in GP. So what this allows you to do is really equip any operational users that might be out in the warehouse that need a quick way to take a packing slip, toggle through, enter quantities, submit it. You still have the oversight in GP with the front end with finance to say, hey, this is the receivings batch. Do we want to post it and commit those quantities? So they have a little oversight in the front office. But this is going to arm your operational staff to really be able to effectively get these quantities in very quickly and efficiently from the warehouse. And so just to kind of recap what we looked at, first was vendor management, very simple vendor lookup. Once we have a vendor card open, tremendous insights, whether it's open POs or the history of what you've purchased, the costing, so quantity break costing to recognize any savings that you should from a vendor that you've negotiated with. All of that is visible directly from that vendor card. And then the purchase advisor we looked at, which allows you to define where you're going to pull your demand signals in from, what kind of demand do you want to consider, the summary view to say this is the total, but as I drill into that, what's driving that total recommendation, and then creating my plan and going to purchase, multi-selecting, cutting those POs. And then once those POs are out, what does that look like on the dock to say, I've got a packing slip in front of me. How can I quickly key in or scan this barcode value to narrow down to that PO and quickly toggle through and add those quantities in to generate that receipt that goes into that GP receivings batch. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover today. Paige, can I throw it back to you to kind of cover kind of a wrap up here?
Thanks, Matt. That was great. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And the last thing we have on the agenda here is really just to do Q&A. So does anybody have any questions that they'd like to put into the chat? We appreciate you guys coming out and listening to us talk about purchase order tips. And I know I enjoyed listening to Matt talk about how Cavallo extends purchase orders into SalesPad. Does anybody have any questions? And if nobody has any questions, of course, you can always reach out to us at Njevity at support@njevity.com. And we'd be happy if you're interested in Cavallo as well, we'd be happy to pass that along to Matt and his team. And we appreciate you guys being here today. So looks like we have one question. How does the PO optimizer handle multiple warehouses? James wanted to know.
Referring to the purchase advisor?
Purchase advisor?
Yeah.
Is that what you were talking about? James?
Yeah. So you can
purchase
select,
advisor.
Yeah. So you can select multiple locations from this lookup, and so if you do want to manage multi-location, so it'll indicate where the demand signal is coming from. So from your location selection, you can do that. And so this is, for this item, it's coming from my south location. So it's all tied to fulfillment and wherever that reorder point data is stored. So this is warehouse, this is south. So you can, have multiple locations brought into that view.
Great. Thanks, Matt. James, did that answer your question? Okay, so Dory wants to know, is Purchase Advisor part of the basic SalesPad application, or is it an extra module?
Is part of the basic SalesPad desktop. Yep. So it's the basic core tool.
Then James had a follow-up on, is there security so only certain folks can see their own warehouse?
Yeah, there's probably a couple different ways we could approach that. So we have a user card where you can set some defaults to. So the answer is yes. It just depends on how we set that up. But yeah, we could do that.
Great. Great questions, guys. Anybody else? James said sounds like a follow-up call next week will be a good time. So it sounds like he's already got something on the books with you guys.
Awesome. Perfect.
He does. Great. James, we'd love to hear it. All right. Anybody else have any questions for Matt or myself? Either one. Well, we appreciate you guys being here again. And if you have any questions or want anything else from either one of us, please reach out. Feel free to reach out, and have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.